After Clint Eastwood's longtime girlfriend died at the age of 61, a representative from the Monterey County Health Department confirms to the Post that Christina died of a heart attack.
At 94 years old, Clint Eastwood did something no one thought possible. He directed his 42nd film. Critics called it his best work in a decade. But behind the scenes, music, he was dealing with a loss that changed everything. His Snort's longtime partner had just passed away without warning. His son later, music, said he was doing good. But the words felt careful. Snort's, then came a strange interview that Eastwood himself called completely phony. Something deeper was happening. And when the truth finally came out, it explained why this might be the last time we ever hear from him. Clint Snort's Eastwood entered the world on May 31, 1930 in San Francisco. And the first thing people noticed was his size. He weighed 11 pounds 6'0". So the nurses called him Samson before anyone even filled out the paperwork. His parents, Clinton Sr. and Ruth, took him home to Oakland's Lake Merritt neighborhood, trying to build a stable life even while the Great Depression kept reshaping their plans. His father worked as a bond salesman at first and later found a long-term path at Georgia Pacific, while his mother stayed home until the children grew older and then joined IBM as a clerk. Clint grew up with one sibling, his younger sister Jean, and the family moved from town to town during the 1930s, chasing opportunities as the economy struggled. These early shifts felt like survival at the time. Yet years later, that story would be twisted in a way no one expected. Snort's, for decades, Clint mentioned poverty and spoke like someone raised on hardship. He leaned into the narrative of a rough childhood shaped by the Depression. Then Sandra Lockcatch, music, who lived with him from 1975 to 1989, broke that image wide open. She revealed how the family eventually settled in Piedmont in 1940, one of the wealthiest suburbs in Northern California. They had a private swimming pool, a country club membership, and enough money for every family member to drive their own car. It created a shock because very few families in 1940s America had even one car, let alone several. Lacka said very plainly that they were never poor. That truth complicated the story Clint liked to tell about himself. Yet the contrast between early uncertainty and teenage privilege, music, quietly shaped the way he moved through the world. Even with the comfort around him, Clint rebelled against school every step of the way. He cared about cars, girls, and beer and almost nothing else. He was held back one full grade in middle school. When he entered Piedmont High in January 1945, the restlessness only grew stronger. Within a year, he was expelled for a mix of reckless stunts, including scrawling an obscene message on the scoreboard, burning someone in effigy, and riding his bicycle across a soaked sports field until he ruined the grass. By that time, he was already 6 feet, 4 and tall, all lanky limbs, leather jackets, and a ducktail hairstyle. He transferred to music, Oakland Technical High School and finally graduated on February 2, 1949. Through all of it, the only subjects that truly caught his attention were music and mechanical work. The year 1949 became even more defining when his parents and sister packed up and moved to Seattle. Clint stayed behind in California at 18, choosing independence over comfort. While the rest of the family settled into a new life in the Pacific Northwest, he found jobs wherever he could. He worked as a firefighter, a golf caddy, and a lifeguard, drifting through Oakland, music, and nearby towns with no clear path, but plenty of determination. That choice to remain in California placed him exactly where he needed to be for what was coming. Only 2 years later, in 1951, he was drafted into the Army and sent to Fort Ord as a swimming instructor. A Universal Studios employee spotted him on the base, and that moment, almost accidental, became, snorts, the first spark of a Hollywood future. Even though the Eastwood family had money by the time they reached Piedmont, the memories of all the earlier relocations stayed with Clint. He absorbed his father's disciplined approach to work. He learned from Ruth's shift from homemaker to corporate clerk. He understood how easily stability could disappear and how hard someone had to work to keep it steady. These subtle lessons shaped his belief in efficiency long before he stepped onto a film set. Later, when he became known for shooting films quickly, quietly, and under budget, he credited that mindset to the values formed during the Depression years. Even if he himself never lived the poverty he described in public, everything changed again on September 30th, 1951, when Clint, now 21, boarded a Navy aircraft after visiting his girlfriend in Seattle. He had worn his uniform to get a free military passenger ride, music, something many soldiers did at the time. The Douglas AD-1Q Skyraider left Sand Point Naval Air Station and headed for California. What began as a routine lift turned into a fight for survival. Clint was serving stateside during the Korean War, working as a swimming instructor at Fort Ord. He had never seen combat. Yet on that evening, his near-death experience came. Music, from the sky rather than the battlefield. At 18:25 hours, everything inside the aircraft began to fail. The radio system died, cutting off all communication. Moments later, the oxygen system failed, too, leaving the pilot and passenger gasping as the altitude pressed down on them. The navigation system went dark, so the pilot had no working instruments to guide him while thick fog rolled across the coast. Even the intercom between the cockpit and Clint's seat went silent. The companion aircraft disappeared into the haze, and the fuel drained faster than expected. By the time the Skyraider reached the waters off Point Reyes, the tanks were empty, leaving the pilot no choice but to ditch the plane into the cold Pacific about 2 miles offshore. The landing was rough but upright, giving Clint and Lieutenant Francis Anderson just enough time to escape into the freezing water. They inflated 2 rafts and paddled away from the sinking aircraft, which dropped roughly 150 feet into the ocean and vanished. Strong currents pulled the men apart until Clint was alone, fighting his way toward a faint lighthouse light on the distant shore. He swam and rode through icy water for nearly an hour, his arms burning, his body shaking. Yet the only option was forward. When he reached land, he wandered inland until he found the RCA radio station at Point Reyes. The station operator later said. Clint looked dazed and barely able to speak. Years later, when Captain Chesley Sullenberger hesitated to allow a movie about his 2009 Hudson River landing, everything changed the moment he learned that Clint Eastwood had survived a similar crash in 1951. That shared understanding broke down Sullenberger's resistance. Their connection helped Clint bring in authenticity, music, to the 2016 film Sully that only someone who had once felt cold water closing in around their body could understand. The crash also altered Clint's path in ways no one predicted. Before the incident, he was scheduled for overseas deployment to Korea. The investigation and medical evaluations that followed caused delays, and by the time the paperwork cleared, his deployment had been canceled. Many young soldiers sent that year never returned home. Instead, Clint remained at Fort Ord as a lifeguard for the rest of his service, the same skill that kept him alive in the Pacific. That experience sharpened his sense of risk and mortality, something that later showed in his films, both as actor and director. After leaving the Army, he jumped into Hollywood with no map and very little money. He dug swimming pools. He drove garbage trucks. He tried LA City College, but left to focus on acting. His, Snort's, roles were tiny and uncredited, appearing for only minutes in films like Revenge of the Creature in 1955. Then on October 23, 1955, Universal Studios dropped him entirely. Executives, Snort's, said he looked odd with his pronounced Adam's apple, slow speech, and chipped tooth. For the Snort's next 3 years, he floated through the industry wondering if the door to acting would ever reopen. Everything shifted in 1958 when Charles Marcus Warren cast him as Rowdy Yates in Rawhide. The show premiered on January 9, 1959 and became Clint's first steady job. At the start, he earned about $700 to $750 per episode. Not much by today's standards, but enough to lift him out of constant financial stress. Millions of viewers welcomed him into their living rooms every Friday night. As the seasons passed, his salary rose to around $100,000 a year. But he still felt boxed in. Rowdy Yates was energetic, loyal, and straightforward. Yet, Snort's, Clint knew there was more inside him waiting for a role that would let him explore it. By 1965, Snort's and music Rawhide began to unravel. That summer, CBS fired Eric Fleming and several cast music members to cut costs. Fleming, Snort's, said publicly that he was earning $220,000. That year, though some believed he exaggerated. Clint became the new trail boss, but CBS didn't raise his pay at all. He was frustrated and felt the show had lost its rhythm. Then the network made a risky scheduling move, shifting Rawhide to Tuesday nights where it faced stiff competition. After only 13 episodes with Clint as the lead, CBS can-led the series. In December 1965, Fleming died the following year on September 28, 1966 while filming in Peru, leaving a tragic shadow over the show's history. What makes this period even more remarkable is that Clint almost missed the opportunity that would change his life. During a break, music between seasons 6 and 7, Italian director Sergio Leone wanted him for a small Western filming in Spain. Clint wasn't especially excited. He was focused on golf and didn't see much potential in the offer. The pay was only $15,000. The director didn't speak English. The film looked like an experiment more than a career move. He took the job mainly out of curiosity. He had no idea how close this moment came to slipping away. Leone had, music, first asked Eric Fleming, who refused because he earned far more on Rawhide. Charles Bronson read the script and dismissed it as the worst he had ever seen. Richard Harrison also declined, but he remembered Clint from a low-budget Western and recommended him. That single suggestion changed Hollywood history. A Fistful of Dollars was filmed on a tight $200,000 budget near Madrid. Crew members went unpaid at times and even removed the set's windows in protest. The film released on September 12, 1964 in Italy and blew past every expectation, earning $19.9 million worldwide. No one told Clint any of this until weeks later. He didn't realize that a movie he approached casually had just reshaped his career. Success, music, grew fast. The second film, for a few dollars more, cost $600,000 to make and earned $15 million. Clint's salary rose to $50,000. When Leon prepared the final film, The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly, Clint hesitated again. The director nearly replaced him with Bronson, music, but Clint returned after being offered $250,000 plus 10% of the Western box office, music, profits. That film earned $38.90 million worldwide. And by the end of Music, the trilogy, he had transformed into a global star. Clint liked to reflect, Music, on how easily he could have missed all of it. If he had chosen golf over that trip to Spain, he might have remained a TV side character, earning $700 an episode. Snorts. Instead, the man with no name introduced him to audiences in a way Raw Hadid never could. Snorts, his silence, his stillness, and the sharp look in his eyes became his trademarks. A style that influenced decades of cinema. By 1968, the numbers said everything. He made Music, $400,000 plus 25% of net profits for Hongam High, $750,000. For Where Eagles Dare, and $1 million for Coogan's Bluff. In just 4 years, he went from $15,000 to more than $1 million per film. One of the most dramatic salary jumps Hollywood has ever seen. Dirty Harry arrived in theaters on December 23, 1971, and the timing alone made people uneasy. Northern California was still living under the shadow of the Zodiac Killer, or real murderer who had shot, stabbed, and terrified Music, the region between 1968 and 1969. At least 5 people were confirmed dead, with the last known killing happening on October 11, 1969, when cab driver Paul Music Stein was shot in San Francisco. The Zodiac had flooded newspapers with taunting letters bragging about killing 37 people, even though police could only confirm 5. By late 1971, investigators had nothing. No arrest. Music, no suspect, no name. Then suddenly, audiences were sitting in dark theaters watching a fictional cop hunt down Scorpio, a killer clearly modeled after Zodiac, complete with random violence and mocking messages to the press. The chill came from knowing that on screen, justice was swift. Snorts. While in real life, the city had been left helpless just 2 years earlier. That discomfort spilled straight into the streets. When the 1971 Academy Awards rolled around, protesters, Snorts, gathered outside holding signs that read, "Dirty Harry is a rotten pig." The country was already raw. The Kent State shootings were only a year old. Vietnam was tearing the nation apart, and trust in law enforcement was collapsing as stories of entrapment, abuse, and corruption filled the news. Clint Eastwood was openly hissed at during appearances in the Bay Area, especially by feminist groups. Critics said the film glorified police brutality at the worst possible moment. The anger was not only about one movie. It was tied to the still-burning debate over the 1966 Miranda versus Arizona decision, which required police to inform suspects of their rights. Conservatives believed it protected criminals. Civil rights groups feared unchecked power. Dirty Harry landed directly in the middle of that collision. The word fascist followed the film almost immediately. Much of it centered, Music, on the scene at Khazar Stadium where Harry shoots. Let us know in the comments. And don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more updates just like this.